What we have here are two Mercedes-Benzes, a 1982 and a 2021. Now this 1982 Mercedes is one of the best cars ever made, and the question is, 39 years later, has Mercedes made it any better? Or is it perhaps a little bit worse? Back in 1982, Mercedes didn't refer to this model as the E-Class. Several years later, it became the E-Class, but back in the day, this was just called the 300D. And these numbers and this letter refer to the engine displacement. 300 meaning a 3-liter, and D meaning diesel. When I pull the hood release on the old Mercedes, a tiny lever emerges from the grille. And that lever is actually the way I open the hood entirely. So pull the lever, and then the hood and the grille both rise and I can access the engine. But of course, working on this engine can be a little bit of a challenge with the grille poking you in the head. So you can actually pull a little release here, and now the hood will open a full 90 degrees. And take a look at the amount of things that are serviceable by the average user. If we use the classic Mercedes nomenclature, then looking at the badge on this new E-Class, we see the letters and number 450. So in theory, this should have a 4.5 liter engine, but it doesn't. Let's see what it has instead. Now, opening the hood on the new Mercedes is much more conventional. So you pull the release, and then just to the left of the Mercedes emblem on the hood, there's a traditional catch, and you can lift the hood up. But there's actually a very big similarity between the old and the new Mercedes-Benz, because even this new car has that really cool service mode where you can lift the hood to nearly 90 degrees. Now you do it a little bit differently because that old Mercedes used springs to hold the hood up. The new one has struts, but I can actually push a little button here on the edge of the strut, and if I do it just right, come on, check that out. I now have full access to all 6 cylinders in this 2021 model. This 1982 Mercedes has a 5-cylinder diesel. That's right, not a 4, not a 6, but a 5-cylinder. It's actually a straight 5, and it's also turbocharged. The power output on this engine was somewhere around 125 horsepower and 180 pound-feet of torque. Here in the US, back in 1982, if you wanted this Mercedes-Benz, you only had a choice of diesel engines. Think about that. There was no gasoline engine available in 1982. Now, fast forward to 2020, and there is, of course, no diesel engine option, at least here in the US, for the new E-Class. Instead, what you get is a choice of gasoline engines. Remember on the back how this says E450? This is not actually a 4.5 liter 6-cylinder. This is a 3-liter inline 6-cylinder. It's turbocharged. It also is a mild hybrid. It uses something called EQ Boost. Now, the power output on this engine, almost exactly 3 times that of the old Mercedes. Over 360 horsepower, about 370 pound-feet of torque. So if you look at power output, they've gone up quite a lot. Time for a 0 to 60 mile per hour test in the fastest Mercedes W123 offered in the US in 1982. I'm in drive, no sport mode or anything, so I'm just gonna floor it. 0 to 60 GPS performance timer rolling in 3, 2, 1, floor. There's 3,000, 3,500 RPM. Oh, over 4,000, 4,500, nearly 5,000 RPM. There's 50. And there's 60 there. All right, what do you guys think? 0 to 60 in 15 seconds. Not a very quick car. Now, Mercedes, I think, said around 14 seconds when it was brand new back in 1982, so it really hasn't lost any power. 0 to 60 mile per hour test in the 2021 E-Class. Just like the old one, I'm just gonna floor it like you're merging onto a freeway. E450 4MATIC, so all-wheel drive. In 3, 2, 1, floored. Oop. Oh, there it is. There's the power. A little bit of turbo lag. Not as bad as the old diesel, though, that's for sure. Ooh, 5.43. under 5.5 seconds from 0 to 60, so about 3 times as quick as the old diesel Mercedes. These old diesel Mercedes are known for being incredibly reliable, and actually if you head out to places like Morocco, they're still being used as taxi cabs even in 2020. Now there's a lot of reasons for this, but a lot of the old timers say it's because these old cars are better made than the new ones. One metric to decide on how well a vehicle is assembled is build quality when it comes to panel gaps. So I've got a precise measuring device here, and I'm going to test the panel gaps along the door on this old Mercedes. Now here at the top of the door, we see this gap is right around 6 millimeters. Let's measure down here by the door handle. The gap is right about 4.3 millimeters, and down here at the bottom of the door, the gap is about 6 millimeters again, so a pretty big variation from top to bottom. Let's check out the new ones. Now at the top of the door, this panel gap is right around 3.7 millimeters, so much smaller than the old one. Here in the middle of the door, that gap is right around 3.7 millimeters. And at the base of the door, that gap is right around 4.4 millimeters. So not only is the gap smaller on the new Mercedes, but the variation is also much smaller, at least compared to the old one. That makes sense because production techniques have improved dramatically. Does that mean that this new Mercedes will last as long as the old one? Well, I'll let you battle that one out in the comment section below. I certainly have my opinions, but let's see what the internet has to say about that one. Starting with the doors here, a very mechanical door handle. You pull it, and it's got this satisfying click as it unlatches. Now this car does, believe it or not, have power door locks, but there's no button in the middle to unlock or lock all the doors. Instead, you use the plunger, and when I push down or pull up on the driver's side plunger, the other doors unlock and lock, but they do so using vacuum. So you can actually hear a little hissing, and then the door lock moves up and down, and as they get old and as the vacuum system gets a little bit tired, they move up and down much more slowly. But the best part about these old Mercedes is the sound when you close the door. Incredible! That is the best sound. It's better than any symphony I've ever heard. Listen to this. Here, I'll get it tied up with the mic. Oh, it's just so good. The new Mercedes has incorporated a lot of technology into the door opening process. With the car locked, I can simply tap the door handle and the vehicle will unlock, and then I can open up the door and take a look at the much more traditional power locks. The vacuum door locks are gone on this new Mercedes, replaced by a much more conventional unlock and lock button. Honestly, probably for the better. Now for the big question, how is the door shut feeling? You know, it's pretty good. But is it as good as the old one? Let me know in the comment section below. The startup procedure in the old Mercedes is a little bit unconventional. Now, first of all, standard blade style key, put it into the ignition, turn it to on, and you hear that horrible buzzer, and you see this little funny orange light. And that light is the indicator for the glow plugs. Now, being an old school diesel, you actually have to wait for the glow plugs to warm up before you can start the engine, but they're nice and warm right now, so crank it over. Ah yes. Sounds like a John Deere. Now we're ready to go into a gear, and we have a pretty traditional shifter here. First of all, park, back into reverse, then of course a neutral and a drive. But below drive we see two indicators, S and L. Now S could stand for sport, but it doesn't. It actually stands for slope. That basically locks the 4-speed transmission into second gear, and then L, that's down into first gear. Now to start the new Mercedes, I've got the key in my pocket, foot on the brake, and push the start button, and it glides into life. Much quieter, and that horrible 1980s buzzer is gone. To put the new Mercedes in the gear, no more shifter here on the console. Instead, we actually have a column shifter. Kind of unusual, at least by modern car standards, but simply pull down into drive, push up for reverse, a slight click down into neutral, and then a push in on the button for park. But it goes further than that. This Mercedes has a 9-speed automatic transmission, and you can shift it manually using these paddle shifters here in the steering wheel. So what's it like driving the 1982 Mercedes-Benz? Well, I'm not gonna romanticize it. It is slow and stinky. Do not buy one of these cars if you're looking for a fun and exhilarating driving experience, because it's not sporty in the least. There is nothing about this that screams, let's drive quickly. However, it is also incredibly solid. The ride quality, the steering, the brakes, they don't inspire sporty driving, but It feels like this could do 55 miles per hour over any terrain. Rough roads, it wouldn't care. Highways, it doesn't care. You know, up a mountain, it wouldn't care. This car is not to be rushed, but it is so incredibly solid. I've never felt a ride like this in any other car. It's not floaty like an old American car. It certainly isn't crisp and dynamic, but it's just earth flattening. That's the only word for it. This thing weighs like 1,000 tons, and it certainly feels like it when you go down the road. So what's the new Mercedes E-Class like on the road? Well, it's entirely different than the old one. It's much firmer, it's much more dynamic, the steering is far more precise, the brakes inspire a lot more confidence than the old one, but it's kind of trying to be a jack of all trades. So it's supposed to be comfortable, yet sporty, yet very quiet, yet exhilarating, and it's kind of good at all those, but you know, not really great at one in particular. So I've got a number of drive modes and I can switch between them, and it'll dial in the suspension. This is the air suspension to be more comfortable or more sporty, but I don't know, it's just a little pedestrian. This drives almost identical in my opinion to the new 5 Series, which drives pretty similar to the A6. Like, there's just not a lot of differentiation. Back in the 1980s, the Mercedes drove nothing like the BMW, which drove nothing like the Audi, and nowadays they're all going for the sporty, chic, comfortable, yet refined, yet elegant, yet Nürburgring worthy, yet Beverly Hills ready. It's just pick a direction and go that way. The seats on this Mercedes are made out of a material called MB-Tex. Now, MB-Tex is basically a military grade vinyl. It's pretty much stronger than any material known to man. In fact, I think the original Egyptians would have been much better off building their pyramids out of MB-Tex. Probably would have withstood the test of time far better. Now, the seats themselves aren't actually all that great. They are very springy and they are very squishy, but they offer absolutely no support anywhere for the back, the shoulders, the legs, none of it. You can slide them and you can recline them a little bit here and there, but apart from that, they're very strong but not very comfortable. The new E-Class, believe it or not, also comes standard with MB-Tex, although I don't know how the modern MB-Tex will withstand to a nuclear blast like the old stuff. But this particular E-Class has the upgraded leather, and the seats are very good. They are actually also still pretty comfortable in terms of their squishiness, but they're also far more supportive. I have tons of adjustability here on the door for the headrest and the bolstering and even the thigh support. And when you go around a corner, the bolsters kind of hug you, and they also adjust on the fly so that you're constantly in a fixed position. They are much, much better seats. The steering wheel in the old Mercedes, much like the rest of the car, is very simple. It's also extremely overbuilt. It's just such high quality. It's got these little bumps in it, this kind of texture they added. 4 spokes. This one doesn't have an airbag. It also has no adjustability whatsoever. It's fixed in one position, and it will remain in that position until the absolute end of time. But it does what it's supposed to do. It steers the car. Now, funny enough, this car does have power steering, but it's like Mercedes figured that after 800 or so thousand miles, the power steering would probably fail, so might as well give them a massive steering wheel so they've got some proper leverage to steer the old Merc. The steering wheel in the new E-Class is full of tech. Just like the rest of the car, it's still leather wrapped. It feels really nice in the hand, but just look at the amount of buttons and controls on both the left and the right side of the steering wheel. And these are touch sensitive, just like an iPhone as well, so you don't actually push in on some of them. You can just gently rest your finger on them to control whatever you're trying to control. Now, the steering wheel itself is also highly adjustable, both up and down. It also telescopes, unlike the old one. This Mercedes was a very expensive car way back in 1982, and even back then you should have had power mirrors, but you didn't on the 300D. Instead, you've got manual adjustments for both the driver and the passenger mirror. The new Mercedes, of course, has power mirrors controlled via this joystick here on the driver door panel, and of course they power fold. The gauges in the old Mercedes are super no nonsense. Big central speedometer, you've got a tachometer here on the right with an integrated clock, and then to the left we've got our vitals, so oil pressure, temperature, and fuel. But funny enough, the oil pressure is actually in bar and the temperature is in Celsius, which is a little bit odd for a US import car. The gauges in this new Mercedes are 100% digital, and even though they look you know, pretty analog in this configuration. I can change them around to look like, well, pretty much whatever I want. So take a look at this. If I go into designs, I can go to a sport display. Everything turns yellow, or maybe something a little bit more progressive. So they are very configurable to your preference, but perhaps a little bit less useful in the real world, although I can even control what the various dials show as well. I've heard so much debate on what this kind of roof configuration is called. Is this a sunroof or is this a moonroof? Now, this is a very old school way of accomplishing this, but basically it's a big steel panel that retracts into the roof when I push this button. And it slides back silently. And actually, this was a very clever piece of engineering. The motor that operates this roof is in the trunk. And when it's in motion, you can't hear it at all. How cool is that? The new Mercedes E450 has a glass roof. And it's got the shade that retracts, and now I can see the sun pouring both in the front and the back. And actually, this front panel should open up. There it goes, it opens up and actually slides back as well. And it's a very large sunroof, or is it moonroof? Let me know in the comment section below. The climate control in the old Mercedes is ridiculously over-engineered. Now, it is an automatic climate control even back in 1982, and the way it works is over here on the right, you have your fan control, so you've got low, high, and then automatic, which they shorten to autumn. But you'll notice in the middle here we actually have the air kind of flow control, so basically where the air blows, and it's like a little game of whack-a-mole. You push one button and the other one pops back up. And then here on the left, this is your temperature control, so you can go from cold to white and then all the way into the red if you want to really heat up the cabin. Now, funny enough, once again, you'll notice even being an automatic climate control, they labeled it in Celsius and not Fahrenheit. The new Mercedes also has automatic climate control, but this time 2 zones. So I've got temperature settings here for both the driver and the passenger, and then coming up to the screen you can see what I do when I change the various settings. I also have heated and cooled seats, and beyond that, for a little bit of additional comfort, I have massage. That's right, massaging seats. Something the old one would never have dreamed of having. But trust me, when it comes to features, the new Mercedes absolutely dominates the old in terms of options that simply weren't available on the old one. Stuff like a heated steering wheel, navigation, XM radio, all-wheel drive, Hey Mercedes voice functionality, lane keep assist, 64 colors of ambient lighting, screens of any kind, touch capacitive controls, and then of course, cup holders. Now, the old Mercedes does have cup holders, but they are absolutely, completely useless. It also has tons and tons of wood. You're probably thinking at this point, well, at least that old Mercedes was much cheaper when new. And you are absolutely correct and absolutely wrong all at the same time. According to NADA guides, this 82 Mercedes had an original MSRP of $29,698. Now, for reference, a Cadillac Fleetwood Brougham back in 1982 would have been almost half the price at $18,000. Now, 29 grand doesn't sound like a lot today, but when you adjust that for inflation, this 82 Benz came in at over $80,000 in today's money. Compare that to the new one, that one is 79 grand. So price-wise, pretty comparable actually. This old Mercedes is rolling on 14-inch wheels. 14s, not 15s, not 18s, not 20s, but 14s. The tires are 195/70 R14s. They are tiny by modern standards, a point I will make, well, right now. The new Mercedes is rolling on 18-inch wheels, and actually these are the smallest wheels available on the E450. If you want 19s or 20s, you can definitely spec those to your heart's desire, but these larger wheels do look good, but it means the tire profile is much smaller, which can lead to a harsher ride. To pop the trunk on the old Mercedes, there's a button here with a key slot. Push it in, and you can lift the trunk open. Now, this is a very traditional old school trunk, very high liftover height, and the seats don't fold down. Let's see how our giant teddy bear fits into the old trunk here of the Mercedes-Benz. Pretty well, but I'm certainly not going to squeeze more than one of them in here because the rear seats don't fold flat or fold down at all. Now, a couple of interesting things. Underneath this mat, you'll find a cardboard tray. Underneath the cardboard tray, look at that. full-size spare tire. Mercedes intended you to fix a flat if you got it on the side of the road, and beyond that, speaking of serviceability, check this out. In the rear here, I've got these little panels with these little thumb screws. I can undo these thumb screws, and I will find, I think, there we go, a panel full of light bulbs. These are the rear light bulbs, and if I get a burned out taillight, simply pop out this panel, throw a new bulb in there, and I'm back on my way. The trunk in the new Mercedes is fully automatic. Push a button on the key, and it glides into life. Now the trunk is much more usable on this new one. First of all, look at the load height here, much lower. Jeff fits in here much happier. And actually, check this out. I can even fold the seats flat using some levers so that he would be even happier if I folded them down. But he just made a huge mess in the trunk of this brand new Mercedes. All right, time to get out my vacuum. But beyond the mess, let's see if we have a spare tire in this vehicle. No spare tire, but there is a place to put your phone, because let's be real, your phone is a modern day spare tire for so many Americans. 39 years later, has Mercedes improved the luxury sedan? Well, objectively, yes. I mean, the new one is far safer than the old one, it's far faster, it's much more refined, it's much quieter, and then when you take price into consideration, you know, the original MSRP on that adjusted for inflation is the exact same as the new one. But I do have a couple issues with the new one. It is jammed with far too much tech. I'm a pretty tech-savvy guy, and I simply can't understand half the things that that car does. It's overwhelming, whereas the old one, granted I am biased because that is my car, is so much simpler. And it's also easy to work on, it's easy to find parts for, and I know it will last until pretty much the end of time, whereas the new one, well, we'll see how MBUX holds up 39 years down the road. As always, this has been Tommy with the Fast Lane Car. Check out tflcar.com for the latest and greatest in independent and honest reviews.